Hello everyone. So welcome to the next session in our Indian Modern History course. And today we are starting the theme 5 with our session number 27, that is Swadeshi movement. Usse pehle, let's discuss it out very quickly what we have done till now. Till now in the theme 1 we talked about the European, how Europeans have come into India, especially the Britishers, how the Britishers have taken over the other European powers and the Indian the relevant Indian powers which were there at that time, princely states, a lot of Mysore, Maratha, Sikh, and the frontiers as well. How they have overtaken the Afghanistan, Sindh, Tibet, and few places. Then in the theme 2, we talked about the administrative policies of the Britishers. We talked about the economic policies. We talked about the socio-cultural policies, and we have seen that how it led to systematic deindustrialization, ruin of the economy, destruction of the socio-cultural fabric of the India at the expense of the India they have developed because of industrial revolution taking place in the British Britain. Then obviously because of such turmoil, there has to be a reaction, has to be there, right? Now reaction has come in a lot of forms. A few reactions have come in a localized civilian sepoy or a peasant revolts. Some reactions have been big, such as 1857 revolt. Some reactions have come in the form of the institutional reaction, such as um, socio-cultural reforms. So socio-cultural, it led many people to think how this handful of the foreigners were able to rule over us. So it led to a lot of socio-cultural reawakening in India and led to the socio-cultural renaissance in India, right? The people like Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Ishwachand Vidyasagar, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Arya Samaj, Ram Krishna Mission, and Vivekanand. We have discussed all of this. That feeling led to the that we are no longer at different parts of the nation. We are weaved together as a nation. So feeling of nation started to come together. A lot of factors were responsible for that. The British factors were also responsible because these British factors led to the integration of the country, the political integration, whether it be the infrastructure, whether it be the railways, the telegraph, whether it was the advent of the modern education through which the Indian intelligentsia got the ideas of the modern ideas, nationalism, secularism, reason, rationality, humanism. These ideas have come to India. Civil liberties, protection of the civil liberties. There in this theme we talked about the press, we talked about the education, and then we finally talked about the modern nationalism, formation of the Indian National Congress, and then we finally talked about the moderates and the extremists, right? So this is how we ended the session number 26. Now today 27 we'll start with the Swadeshi movement. Before we start the Swadeshi movement, there are a few things which I would like to discuss. Dekho, a lot of details are there in your books, है ना? The books that you read. You can find the summaries of the books, you can find all the questions that I'll discuss, or you will do from the test series from the book itself. What is important is the discussions we are having before, or the discussions before the PPTs, like these discussions. Now, every moment, let us first talk about every moment or everything that happens has a one subjective. We have already discussed one subjective component and then one objective component. You can call it a trigger moment as well. Subjective component, for example, let us talk about the Swadeshi movement. So the subjective component is obviously we have discussed the modern nationalism, the advent of the modern nationalism, the reactionary policies of the Britishers, the very contempt with which the Lord Curzon saw Indians, right? The repressions which is meted out to the extremists. For example, we have seen the treatment which is given to the Tilak. So all these things are brewing up. है ना? These things are there. For example, Tilak having the Shivaji and Ganpati festival. These things are there. The political propaganda through press and everything is going on. But to develop it into a finally a movement, a seminal movement, a leap in the a particular movement, a watershed movement, you require some trigger. Now, in this Swadeshi movement, the trigger was the announcement of the partition of the Bengal. Right? This is what this is what the trigger for the Swadeshi movement. So all that resentment, all that repressed emotions, all that awakening finally got its concrete manifestation in the form of the Swadeshi and the boycott movement. Next, what we need to study from the exam perspective with respect to the Swadeshi movement. किन चीजों का ध्यान रखना है? What are the things we need to keep in mind? First, the background. The background, that is the formation of the Congress, INC form 1985, 1885. Then you have the moderate leadership. Then you have the extremist coming into the picture. Then you have the rule of the Lord Curzon. Right? Then you need to remember the series of events which have taken place. For example, first the announcement of that we will partition Bengal. So first the announcement, then the reaction, first the moderate phase, when they will try to convince the Britishers, no, 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 don't do this partition is not good, and all these things. Then these moderates will fail and the partition will be carried on, and then under the extremist leadership, how this movement went on. Today's session will have a lot of congruence with the previous session, extremist, and we will again see in the next session when we'll talk about the Surat split, how this moderate and the extremist became head on with each other, and the split happened in the Congress. Chalo. Now, from exam perspective, which are the things which you need to keep in mind from prelims perspective and from mains perspective? From prelims perspective, you need to keep in mind, for example, a few, or what are the few concrete manifestations of the, or concrete points which was there in the movement. For example, we will see corps of volunteers, है ना? So these are the few things. Who was the leader associated with it? Which of the leaders have taken the movement at which places? Okay. The chronology is very important. The different leaders and different things that they have done. For example, someone has done something in the chemical industry, someone has done Amar Sonar Bangla, Abhinendranath Tagore. So these things becomes with respect to the leaders. So these are the few things which you need to keep in mind from the prelims perspective. From the mains perspective, it's very easy. The background of the movement, then the consequences of the movement, and then how this Swadeshi movement was a different movement, or comparing it with the previous movement, how it was a leap, how it was a leapfrogging of the national movement from one phase to the other, and how it sets up a motivation for the future movements to come. This is all is required from prelims and the mains perspective. Rest all that I'll discuss after this will be just the reiteration or filling in the blanks of whatever we have discussed in this particular 5 minutes. Chalo. Let us start with the discussion. So, the British or the Lord Curzon specifically decided that we need to partition the Bengal. Bengal was a very big province, very important province. We have seen that how with the Battle of Palasi, after the winning Battle of Palasi and then Battle of Buxar, how that winning of the Bengal has led to uh, the all over India, how they were able to establish their supremacy all over India only after they have conquered the one of the most rich province of the India. So Lord Curzon announced that we will have the partition, announced the partition of India on 1905. 1905 we will partition Bengal. It was announced in 1903. Take. Now they will divide the Bengal into two parts, Eastern Bengal and Assam. This is Eastern Bengal, right, with the capital in Dhaka, sorry, and then the western part of the Bengal, which will be capital in the Kolkata or Calcutta at that time. So these will be the two Bengals which will be there. First is the Eastern Bengal and second will be the with this Western Bengal. And you remember the current Bangladesh is nothing but this Eastern Bengal minus the Assam part. Okay, fine. Now they have to give some official reasons why they are doing so. So official reasons given by the Britishers ki bhai Bengal has become too big to administer. It is a very big province. A lot of people are there. More than 78 million people are there. A quarter of the population of the British India. So it has itself is big. It's like a big nation. So for administrative conveniences, we need to divide the into two parts, such as we have divided MP and Chhattisgarh later on. We have divided Uttarakhand and the Uttar Pradesh because of the administrative convenience. So the stated position was that कि भाई administrative convenience is a very big challenge and we need to divide the Calcutta into two parts, or the Bengal into two, not Calcutta, but Bengal into two parts for this purpose. And it was true to some extent, yes, because it was a very big and misgovernance was obviously there. So it could be one of, it is partly true. But the real reasons we all know. After 1857 revolt, Britishers have officially adopted the policy of divide and rule. Now Bengal was the, we have seen from 1820s itself, it has been the center stage of all the protests, whether it was Derosians, whether it was Raja Ram Mohan Roy, whether it was Ishwachand Vidyasagar, or later it was a lot of revolts which have taken place. For example, Indigo revolt which has taken place. So all these things have seen that Bengal is the nerve center. Bengal is also the place which is a place for intellectuals. A lot of intellectuals have come from Bengal. Aurobindo Ghosh, Bipin Chandrapal. So a lot of intellectuals which will provide leadership to the movement. A lot of delegates of the W.C. Banerjee, for example, Indian National Movement, Indian National Congress first president, they belong to Bengal. So Bengal was emerging as a nerve center which will be challenging the British in the future. So British thought ki bhai, let us divide it. And let us divide it on communal lines and the language lines. We'll see. So the real reasons for the real motive behind the partition was the British to weaken the Bengal, the nerve center of the Indian nationalism, divide the population on the basis of religion, weaken the spirit of nationalism. Lord Curzon understood Bengali nationalism and how Bengal has become the center of the revolutionary activity and the divide policy of the divide and rule. Rest things you can download the PDF and study. Then division was happening or has been done on basis of two factors. First, the language, and second, religion was obviously there. Now language means within the Bengal, within the western Bengal, the western Bengal, the Bengalis was reduced to minority. Interesting. So Bengali speaking people were only 17 million and 37 million Hindi and the Odia speaking people in the western Bengal. देखो पहले they have divided the Bengal into two parts. Already West Bengal and the East Bengal. East Bengal, obviously, it's a Muslim dominated region. So that is already alienated. Now we have to divide the West Bengal on the religious line, on the language line. So Hindi speaking, only small portion will be Bengali speaking and majority will be Hindi and Odia speaking. So divide, making Bengalis a minority in their own province, language wise. So again, a division based upon the language. So this is how they have divided the Bengal. Okay. Now it was very clear that what is the official line and what is the real reason which was there. Okay. So you can see western half was to be Hindu majority area, 42 million out of the 54 million. Out of the 54 million, 37 million Hindi and Odia speaking and 17 million Bengali in this. And other half was a Muslim majority area. Out of the 31 million, 18 million were Muslims. Now, what was the idea? That if we give a Muslim majority province, it was in alignment with the policies of the Britishers to woo the Muslims. That Muslims, the reaction, especially the reactionary elements within the Muslims, we will try to keep them with us. For example, we have read with the Sir Syed Ahmad Khan as well. For example, they started this United Patriotic Association, an opposition to the Congress, because they did not like the Congress and their activities later on. So they were trying to boo the Muslim, and they said ki bhai dekho dekho, we have given you the one Muslim majority province, and Dhaka would become the capital of the new Muslim majority province, which would provide them a unity not experienced by them since the days of the old Muslims kings and the viceroys. ठीक? So it was clear that the government was trying its old policy of propping up the Muslim communalists to counter Congress and the national movement. So stem the growth of the national movement, they were trying to woo the Muslim communalist, and they somehow succeeded too. In 1906, All India Muslim League was formed. Tick. Right. Then partition of Bengal. So after the partition, revolutionary activities has emerged more strongly than before, and the role of extremists became active. We will see again. It's just a summary. Swadeshi movement not only became popular in Bengal but also spread to the other parts of India. It has developed a sense of unity, and ultimately, in response to the partition of Bengal, Swadeshi and boycott movement started. Check. Now, the thing that I was discussing, the subjective and the objective thing. You see this line. Let's read this line. The partition has actually provided a cause to the nationalists for the agitation against the unjust British rule and to aware the masses about the same. That they know that the British is unjust. It is just one of the instances through which they can see, they can tell the people more objectively, see this policy of the British, what is their real intention is. Chalo. So overall about Swadeshi movement. Swadeshi movement was one of the most prominent and the most successful movement before the arrival of the Gandhi. It finds itself in the backdrop of the mendicant policies of the early nationalists. Mendicancy means yachna, means okay, prayer, petition, please do it, please do it. That attitude that resisted the British un-British rule in India, but believed in the English monarchy per se. The moderates. I have given you one question of the Dadabhai Naroji also. That what do you mean by the un-British rule? Right. So major cause of the Swadeshi movement can be attributed to the partition of Bengal, which was seen as the English nationalists as a divisive tactics of the Britishers to weaken the Bengali intelligentsia class, which was seen as a cradle of the Indian resistance. Chalo. Now let's talk event by event. Now in 1903, we have seen that the partition was announced that, okay, after 2 years, we will do the partition. Now, in between these two times, the moderates have taken over the leadership, or moderates tried their own methods. Okay, let us see and they still believe in the justness of the British. Okay, when British will know the public opinion, they will reverse their stand. So a lot of moderates were there. So leadership provided by the Surendra Nath Banerjee, K.K. Mitra, Prithvish Chandra Ray, 1 to 2 names you can remember. The method adopted were petitions, public meetings, memorandum, propaganda through pamphlets, and all these things. Objective was to exert sufficient pressure government through an educated public opinion and England to prevent the unjust partition from Bengal from being implemented. But they have ignored this everything, and they have finally announced the partition of the Bengal in July 1905. It was in these meetings that the pledge of the boycott foreign goods was taken. Now you see the moderates methods have failed because moderates have thought that if we put the enough resistance, if we put up enough pressure on the Britishers, they will relent and they will cancel this partition. So it goes to show, we'll see after effects on the moderates. The moderates policies have failed. Okay. Then August 1905, with the passage of the boycott resolution, massive meeting held in Calcutta Town Hall, the formal proclamation of the Swadeshi movement was made. Now finally, day of partition, that is October 16, 1905. It was on this day the partition has finally taken place. It was celebrated, or it was observed as a day of mourning. People have making symbolic gestures such as they bathed in Ganga, walked barefooted, singing Bande Mataram, Amar Sonar Bangla, a national anthem of the present day Bangladesh was composed by Rabindranath Tagore, was sung by people. People tie Rakhi to each other. Rakhi to each other hands, a symbol of unity of two halves of the Bengal. Later in the day, Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan Bose addressed huge gatherings. Money was raised. So all these things was done at the eve of the partition. Now, slowly and slowly, as you see, the moderates will go down. Their methods have failed. And now the extremists will say, no, 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 this is our movement and this is our movement to gain Swaraj. We will go for Swadeshi, we will go for boycott, and we will spread this movement not only in Bengal, but also all over the India. This is no longer an anti-partition movement. This has now become a Swadeshi and the boycott movement, and we will spread it to different parts of India. Soon the movement start to spread in other parts of the country where the extremist leaders also contributed in Pune, Bombay under Tilak, so Tilak in Bombay, Punjab under Lala Lajpat Rai, Ajit Singh in Delhi under Sayyid Haider Raza, in Madras under Chidambaram Pillai. So now it is spread to many directions in Punjab, in Bombay, in Madras, and in North Delhi. Indian National Congress 1905 met under the leadership of the Gokhale, condemned the partition of the Bengal and the reactionary policies of the Curzon. You know, they meet in December 1905, support anti-partition and Swadeshi movement of the Bengal. But moderates were still saying, ki bhai, let's keep it to Bengal only. But the extremists were saying, no, 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 we will not let this be centered only in the Bengal. We will take it outside. Militant nationalists Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bipin Chandrapal, Aurobindo Ghosh wanted the movement to take in outside Bengal to other parts of the country, to go beyond the boycott of the foreign goods and full-fledged political mass struggle with the goal of attainment of Swaraj. So you can see the split, the background of the split brewing. Moderates were saying that let's keep it within Bengal. Let's not take it outside Bengal. Otherwise, it will again cause the repression from the British. British will again suppress our movement. Don't do this. Extremists know we will spread it outside. And now the seeds of the split are being formed. A big step was taken in the Congress session. We will see this split, whole chronology of the split again in the next session. So don't worry about it. A big step was taken at the Congress session of Calcutta 1906 under the presidentship of the Dadabhai Nauroji. So in 1906, Calcutta, Dadabhai Nauroji again became the consensus builder among the moderates and the extremists. Both respected Dadabhai Nauroji, and that's why he became the president of this particular session in Calcutta, and in which, under the pressure of the extremists, the goal of the National Congress was self-government of Swaraj like United Kingdom or the colonies of the Australia and Canada. Colonies of Australia and Canada, we have already discussed. They are the dominions. They accept the sovereignty of the Queen monarchy that is in the Britain. But they are autonomous. They don't, the monarchy does not interfere at all. It is just that they accept that the sovereign is the monarchy, that is the Queen or the King of the Britain. That's all. Then moderate extremists dispute over the pace of the movement and the techniques of the struggle reached to a deadlock. Surat session, where the national movement was happened, where the party split, and that has a serious consequence on the Swadeshi movement. Obviously, when the main political party which is leading this movement, within that political party, if there is a dissension among the members, then obviously the movement cannot go a lot long because of the Surat split. So Congress, moderates, and extremists split. That we'll discuss again in the next session. Now we talk about the movement that is the Swadeshi movement under the extremist leadership. So yes, moderates have failed. Moderate-led movement have failed. Government has resorted to suppressive measures. Suppressive measures means they will ban everything. They will ban the newspapers. They will put these people who are singing the Vande Mataram into jail, right? They will ban these protests. They will do this arrest, the deportation of the leaders, repression by the police, divisive tactics, right? So you can see atrocities on the students, many of whom were given the corporal punishment, ban on the public singing on the Vande Mataram, restrictions on the public meeting, prosecution and the long imprisonment of the Swadeshi workers. Obviously, the government will do it, the repression. But extremists were emboldened. They were ready to take up this sacrifice. We have discussed They knew that masses, they believe that the masses can do this self-sacrifice. They knew that masses have a urge for Swaraj. And when they have the urge for Swaraj, they can take up these sacrifices. So they gave the call of this passive resistance, that is non-violent opposition to the authority, especially a refusal to cooperate with the legal requirements. In addition to the Swadeshi and boycott, which will include boycott of the government schools, college, government service, courts, legislative councils, government titles, and all these things. Aurobindo Ghosh put it more clearly: make the administrator under the present condition impossible by an organized refusal to do anything which will help either British commerce or exploitation of the country or British officialdom in the administration of it. So let's not cooperate with them. Let's show passive resistance to their establishment. So Aurobindo says political freedom is the life breath of the nation. Thus, extremists gave the idea of India's independence for the central place in India's politics and goal of independence to be achieved through self-sacrifice. Now you can see, you will be confused, sir, kabhi hum independence ki baat kar rahe hain. Sometimes you're talking about independence, sometimes you're talking about Swaraj, sometimes you're talking about the dominion status. And this is one of the problems with the Swadeshi movement, you will see, because the leaders themselves were not very clear that what is the idea of the Swaraj. Some were saying the complete independence, some were saying nahi, by Swaraj only self-limited government will be fine, someone saying that dominion status should be given. So a lack of clarity was there that what is the official, what officially do we want in the concrete terms. Okay. So this was the background under the moderate leadership, under the extremist leadership. What is important for us from the main perspective, that different techniques and outcomes of the, or different things which happened in the Swadeshi movement, right? So let's start. The first is the boycott of the foreign goods. From the name itself, boycotting the foreign goods. We'll see details as well. Public meetings and the processions, easy. Co-ops of the volunteer and the Samiti, which was a very different tactics which was done in this movement. So this is important from police perspective. Take from prelims perspective, this is important. Then imaginative use of the popular festivals, that is done by the Tilak. Emphasis on the Atma Shakti, that is the self-reliance. So putting a lot of emphasis on that. So that is also very much there in the Swadeshi movement. Program of Swadeshi, that is education, not only in education but also in enterprise. That means Swadeshi means Swadeshi education, educational institutions which were Indian, and also the enterprise which were Indian. Then impact on the cultural sphere, that is the Abanindranath Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, and all these things. In fact, this was one of the peculiar things that has come with the Swadeshi movement, and that is also very important from our mains and the prelims perspective as well. Very quickly, let us discuss point by point. First is the boycott of the foreign goods. So for example, they used to do this mass burning of the foreign clothes in the public places, mass burning of the foreign clothes, public burning of the foreign clothes, boycott of the foreign meat, salt, sugar, refusal by the priest to ritualize the marriage if it involves the exchange of the foreign goods. For example, if you want to marry someone and if you are exchanging the foreign goods, the priest will say, no, we will not, I will not preside over this marriage ceremony. Refusal by the washerman to wash the foreign clothes. This was a very protest met with a great success in the practical and the popular level. But think yourself, when the Indian markets are flooded only with the foreign clothes, how long this boycott movement can sustain? Obviously, not a practical idea. Why? Because you don't have the enough Swadeshi content, or you don't have the Swadeshi clothes. Even if they are costly as compared to the foreign clothes made by the Industrial Revolution or the factories coming from the Britishers. So it was in the short run, it was fine. But in the long run, obviously, it is not a feasible strategy. Obviously. So let's also keep in mind the shortcomings of the movement. Then the public meetings and the procession emerged as a mass mobilization. Simultaneously, there were a popular expression. A lot of different sections of the society which till now have been untouched. For example, students. So a lot of students who have boycotted the education institutions of the Britishers have come and protested. So they came out in the large number and to propagate to propagate and practice Swadeshi and to take lead in the organizing picketing of the shops selling the foreign clothes. Their participation was visible in Bengal, Maharashtra, especially in Pune, many parts of South, Guntur, Madras, Salem, and police adopted repressive attitude. School and colleges whose students have participated. So the government has said, we will not give you grants, we will not give you privileges to the schools. For example, similar currently government. If a lot of students from a particular university are now protesting, so they will government will say this university will not give you grants, will cancel the MPhil courses, like that. The students who found guilty of the participation were to be disqualified for the government jobs. Abhi Bihar ka hua tha na. So the Bihar government has said that those who are participating in this farmer movement, they will be disqualified for the government jobs forever. So thoda sa, the governments and the state always have this tendency to control, isn't it? Scholarship disciplinary actions were to be taken against these students. Women which were till now have been confined to their home, they will now from this moment onwards, from Swadeshi movement onwards, will play a very important role. And later on Gandhi ji will come and Gandhi ji will always will take it to the very next level. Gandhi ji will consider the importance of the participation of the women in the revolution or in the movement very, very important, at a very significant aspect of the revolution or the movement. But it was through the Swadeshi movement now the women have came out of their homes and started to participate. So the women who were traditionally home centered, especially those of the urban middle class, took active part in the procession and the picketing. Picketing means, for example, this is a liquor shop. So they will go and they will form a protest there. They will stand up there, and those people who are coming in, they will try to persuade them, don't do this, don't buy this, and all these things. This is known as picketing, dharna. Then from now onward, they will play a very important role in the national movement. Because of this, UPSC has asked twice the role of the women in the Indian national movement. What about the Muslims? Now we have seen the partition of the Bengal has the roots in the communal tendency or the divide and rule policies of the Britishers. Obviously, the biggest victim of that will be the Muslims. Now, though a few Muslims have participated in the Swadeshi movement. For example, some Muslim participated, Barrister Abdul Rasul, Liaquat Hussain, and all these, Maulana Azad, who joined one of the extremist revolutionary groups. But most of the upper and the middle class Muslims have stayed away. They have formed this All India Muslim League in December 1906 as an anti-Congress front, and the reactionary elements like Nawab Salimullah of Decca were encouraged. So under the leadership of Nawab Salimullah of Decca, who became the Dhaka or Decca, Britishers were not able to speak Dhaka, so that's why they call it Decca. So Dhaka, so the capital of the eastern Bengal, the Nawab of that place, he was given patronage by the Britishers. He established this All India Muslim League, to which all this upper class and the middle class Muslim gravitated towards. The nature of the Swadeshi movement also leaders with evoking the Hindu festivals and goddess of the inspiration tend to exclude the Muslim. We have discussed that. For example, Shivaji will talk about the Ganpati festival, the Shivaji festival, who are the symbol of the Hindu nationalism. So all these things having a Hindu tinge will repel the Muslims. That is one of the problems with the Swadeshi movement, that Swadeshi movement had this Hindu tinge, a reactionary element, a lot of role of the religion in the politics, which were said to be one of the odd legacies of the Swadeshi movement. A lot of labor arrest and the trade unions were also there. Initially, some strikes were organized on the issue of rising prices, racial insult, primarily in the foreign owned companies. Between 1906 and 1900, strikes in the jute mills were very frequent, affecting all mills. Subramanyam Shiva and Chidambaram Pillai led strikes in Tuticorin and Tribunuveli in the foreign-owned cotton mills. In Rawalpindi, some arsenal and the railway workers were on strike. So the social base of the movement expanded to include certain section of the zamindar, students, women, and the lower middle class in cities. We will see this labor movement and the labor class movement will become more prominent with 1919 onwards, with the rise of left in India. Yes, there were some instances in the Swadeshi movement this has become, but not at a very large scale. ठीक? An attempt was made to give the political expression to the economic grievance of the working class by organizing strikes, but the movement was not able to garner the support of the Muslim, especially the Muslim peasantry. ठीक? चलो. Next is the corps of volunteer, that is the samitis. So Swadesh Bandhap Samiti, one of the samitis, that name is important for prelims. So Swadesh Bandhap Samiti of Ashwini Kumar Dutt in Barisal emerged as a very popular and the powerful means of mass mobilization. So basically they have these volunteers who will come, and small samitis, you know, have been formed as volunteers very active in participating and propagating the message of the Swadeshi in the backward in the rural areas as well. In Triveni, Tamil Nadu, Chidambaram Pillai, Subramaniam Shiva, some lawyers formed a Swadeshi Sangam which inspired the local people. So they generated the political consciousness among the public through magic lantern lectures, Swadeshi songs, providing physical and moral training to the members, social work during the famines and epidemics, training in the Swadeshi crafts, and all these things. So this was the works of the volunteers. So you can say they form some sort of a parallel government, but don't use this word. But yes, they are doing all the work which is a parallel government works is done. The word parallel government with respect to national movement is associated with the Quit India movement that we will see later on. 1942. But still, this corps of volunteers, they are doing everything that an Indian government or an Indian organization ought to do in the face of the British repression. Then we have already discussed the role of the Ganpati festival, Shivaji festival. Why it was done also we have discussed, because the Indian masses, a lot of ignorance, a lot of poverty, lack of educations, were not able to grasp the modern ideas such as nation, such as reason, humanism, civil liberties. They're not able to gather these ideas. For them, it was easy to galvanize or to become part of the national movement through appeal to the medieval identities or pre-modern, let's call it a pre-modern identities. What are these pre-modern identities? That is caste, that is religion. So these are the pre-modern identities with which they were able to relate with themselves. Okay? So Ganpati's festival, Shivaji festival, became a medium of the Swadeshi propaganda, not only in the Western India but also in the Bengal. Traditional folk theater arts were used for this purpose. And because of this, because of the symbols of these Hindus, Muslims have faced a indifference. Then very important idea of the Swadeshi movement was the focus on the self-reliance, that is Atma Shakti. You can relate with the new idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat also, because that is also rooted in the idea of Atma Shakti, that is self-reliance. In your essays, you can also compare this, the Swadeshi movement in 1905 to 2020. Say भाई कि कितने साल का difference है, 115 years बाद and all. So this is one thing you can start your essays also by comparing with giving a time stamp, Swadeshi movement and the Atmanirbhar Bharat, something like that. So self-reliance and Atma Shakti was encouraged. It means the reassertion of the national dignity, especially in the face of the reactionary or the racial policies of the Lord Curzons. In practical terms, this included the social reforms and campaign against the caste oppression, early marriage, dowry, and consumption of alcohol and all. So it also included some internal reforms. Now, promotion of Swadeshi, both in education and the enterprise. Few of the things that you need to remember. For example, Bengal National College, inspired by Tagore Shanti Niketan, with Aurobindo Ghosh as its principal. National Council of Education was set up with a system of education, literary, scientific, and technical. Education imparted through vernacular medium. Bengal Institute of Technology was set up. So 2 to 3 institutions you need to remember. A lot of enterprise have also been set up, because when they're boycotting the British good, they are supposed to establish some of the Indian and the indigenous enterprise. Otherwise, how will their requirements will be fulfilled? But obviously, they cannot compete with the British clothes or the British goods. Tick. And this is how, so this is why these enterprises were based more on the patriotic zeal rather than the business acumen. And that is why that is will also be the short term success, but long term they will not be able to sustain themselves. Chidambaram Pillai venture into the national shipbuilding enterprise Swadeshi Steam Navigation Company at Tuticorin, however, gave a challenge to British Indian Steam Navigation Company. To challenge this company, he established his own national shipbuilding enterprise. Swadeshi and backward movement were insistence on the economic self-reliance, है ना, which to be assertion of the self-confidence, promoting the indigenous industries, stimulus to the cottage industry and large-scale enterprises. Many textile mills and all these things have increased. In the short run, yes, it increased a lot of production has increased of the Swadeshi things. Again, Tisco, Tata Iron and Steel Company in the Singhbhum district of Jharkhand began production of indigenous iron and steel. So this is the Indian capitalist also started to emerge. Tick. Vivekanand to Jamshed Tata ji, how wonderful it would be if we could combine the scientific and technological advancement of the West with the aestheticism and the humanism of the India. Again, Acharya P.C. Ray set up Bengal's chemical Swadeshi store. Rabindranath Tagore also helped in opening a Swadeshi store. Then Amar Sonar Bangla of Rabindranath Tagore in the cultural sphere. We have seen that on the eve of the partition, people have sang the Bande Matram, Amar Sonar Bangla. Subramanyam Bharati wrote Swadesh Geetam. So these are the things done in the cultural sphere. More importantly, the Abanindranath Tagore's contributions are very, very significant. So Rabindranath Tagore, something about him, Bengali polymath, reshaped Bengali literary music, first non-European to win a major Nobel Prize in 1913, only person to author the national anthem of the two nations, India and Bangladesh, and a lot about Rabindranath Tagore. A lot of quotes. Recently, Economic Survey also quoted Rabindranath Tagore's quote about the freedom. Then Abanindranath Tagore, right? So let's first talk about Abanindranath Tagore. This is one thing, if you have watched our current affairs, we have discussed that. So let's very quickly discuss it. So Abanindranath Tagore, Dwarkanath Tagore, industrialists, work with the Britishers. Devendranath Tagore, we have discussed, that is with respect to the Brahmo Samaj and the conflict with the Keshav Chandra Sen. We have discussed about him. His son, Satyendranath Tagore, first person to join the Indian Civil Services, and then Rabindranath Tagore. Then the second son of the Dwarkanath Tagore, then son, and then son. That means Rabindranath Tagore's nephew. That is Abanindranath Tagore. Now, Abanindranath Tagore has taken the initiatives in the painting. So he broke the dominance of the Victorian naturalism over the Indian art scene and took inspiration from the old Indian painting, Ajanta, Mughal, and Rajput. So miniature paintings. And that's why they established this Bengali school of art also. Very famous painter, that is Nandalal Bose, also left major imprints on the Indian art, was the first recipient of scholarship offered by the Indian Society of Oriental Art, founded in 1907. In science, Jagdish Chandra Bose, Praful Chandra Ray, and other pioneered the original research. This Abanindranath Tagore, he was a singular figure in the modern Indian art. He criticized Raja Ravi Verma. He said that this Raja Ravi Verma, what he is doing, Raja Ravi Verma is only he's copying the Western ideas, though he is using the Indian themes, but his ideas are Western. He said, no, we need a complete Indian or indigenous, or we need to trace our inspiration from the old Indian paintings. So he was supporter of the Swadeshi value, reduce the English influence on the Indian artists, reject the materialist art of the West. Then against the art of the Raja Ravi Verma, imitative and westernized, unsuitable for depicting India's national myth and the legends. We have discussed in detail in the current affairs about Abanindranath Tagore. Some of the very famous painting, that is Bharat Mata. You can see the time of the Bharat Mata also combining with the Swadeshi movement. Chalo. Then the All India aspect of the Swadeshi movement in support of the Bengali unity and Swadeshi boycott organized in many parts of the country. Tilak played a very important role. We have seen that a lot of leaders have taken the movement from Bengal to the many places. You can make this small diagram also when the Swadeshi movement comes. So representing then All India aspect of the Swadeshi movement. He realized that here was a challenge and opportunity to organize a popular mass movement against the British rule to unite the country in the bond of the common sympathy. Then later on, after a lot of things in 1911, the partition was annulled. So this is an important fact that we need to remember, that finally they decided to annul the partition mainly to curb the menace of the revolutionary terrorism, which we'll discuss in the next to next session. So in 1911, finally the partition was annulled, and there was a darbar which was being announced, and a few things have been done. For example, King George visited India. The capital was transferred from Calcutta to Delhi in 1911. Okay? So they transferred capital from Calcutta to Delhi, and this was again said to appease the Muslims. Now, because the annulment came as a surprise to the Muslims, they said, Ki, Are bhai, what you have done? First, you have given us a Muslim majority province. Now you have annulled the partition, not done. But they again shifted the capital from Calcutta to Delhi to appease the Muslims. They decided to shift the capital to Delhi as a sop to the Muslims associated with the Muslim glory, but Muslims were not pleased. The Bihar and the Odisha were taken out of the Bengal, and Assam was made a separate province. So some separate province was created, and the Bengal became the western and the eastern Bengal, and smaller Bengal was made. But the partition between the eastern and the western Bengal was annulled. Tick. Very quickly, the evolution of the Swadeshi movement. So movement fizzled out in 1908. The open phase as different from the underground revolutionary phase. It was almost over. Now, why it fizzled out? So some of the reasons we have already seen. One is the Surat is split, the division within the Congress between moderates and the extremists. Secondly, the government repression. You can imagine the government repression which was there. Then thirdly, the very nature of the mass movement. Gandhiji later on in his philosophy discussed that it is in the very nature of the mass movement. The mass movement cannot be carried on with the same zeal for far too long. So that is why he said that there needs to be phase, struggle, truce, struggle. So struggle can be carried out at the same pitch for a, let's say, year, 2 year or 3 year, but cannot be carried on indefinitely, because people get very tired. They cannot carry on the movement with the same pitch. Then we have seen that with respect to Swaraj, there was a lack of clarity, lack of organization was there. Then the reach was limited because of the lack of the Muslim participation. Communal Muslims, you can say, they organize themselves under the leadership of the Nawab Salimullah. Then a lot of more reasons. For example, the leadership lost. Tilak sent to jail, Aurobindo Ghosh retired to Pondicherry, Bipin Chandrapal retired. So everyone, the Lajpat Rai went outside India. So because of which there was no leadership to carry on this movement. The moderates were happy with the reforms that were coming in 1909, that is Morley Minto reforms. Okay. So this is how the movement has finally fizzled out. Let us very quickly discuss the reasons. So there was a severe government repression. The movement failed to create an effective organization or a party structure. It threw up the entire gamut of technique that later came to be associated with the Gandhian politics: non-cooperation, passive resistance, filling of the British jail, social reform, but failed to give these techniques as disciplined force. Movement was rendered leaderless, with almost all of the leaders arrested or deported by 1808, with Aurobindo Ghosh and Bipin Chandrapal retiring from the active politics. Then internal squabbles among the leaders magnified by the Surat split much harm to the movement. The movement aroused the people, but did not know how to tap the newly released energy. Take. Then movement largely confined to the upper and the middle class and the zamindars. It was become difficult to sustain a mass movement for too long. And a lot of ideas such as non-cooperation, passive resistance remain mere ideas. A lot of points we have seen also in the last session with respect to the issues with the extremist leadership. You can also mention here. But still, we can say that it was a leap, it was a turning point. Some of the things that we have seen, for example, in the impact in the cultural sphere, the focus on the self-reliance and the Atma Shakti which was there, the focus on the Swaraj which became important, the participation of a lot of section which was not there, which will set up a ground for Mahatma Gandhi to come later on to exploit on the same energy which has been created. Then political awareness to the people, which was done, participation of the women, and a lot of things, lot of positives which can come out of the Swadeshi movement. है ना? Now, very quickly, it was proved to be a leap in the more than one untouched section of the society. Students, women, workers, some section of urban and the rural participated. All major trends of the national movement started from this movement. For example, we will see after the Swadeshi movement, you have the moderates, you can see extremists, you can see revolutionaries after it. है ना? We will see after it those revolutionary, those who will believe in the individual heroism, बंदूक से मारेंगे, violent means. So a lot revolutionary activities, incipient socialism, because we can see, we have seen the leader is the strikes by the working class and all. So some socialism is also is on rise. It is not confined to the political sphere, art, literature, science, industry. People aroused from the slumber, and we gained a lot of experience from the this particular movement. It undermines the hegemony of the colonial ideas and the institutions. Okay? Because we gained self-respect, much needed self-dignity, self-identity, which was required with respect to the Swadeshi movement. Let's talk about the after effects on the moderates. Now, moderates were obviously not happy because, first of all, their efforts have not taken place, plus extremist popularity has increased. Okay? They were not able to find rhythm with anyone, whether it was youth, whether it was masses, and they have lost their hold over things. After the Surat split, yes, they extremist leadership went away because of the repression, but moderates were they was given the sop in the form of the Morley-Minto reforms. We will see that. But overall, moderates realize that their policies and their way of doing things is not working at all. Tick. So, Swadeshi and the boycott made it clear that the moderates have outlived their utility and the politics of the petition speeches has become obsolete. It has succeeded in keeping the pace with the time, and it was highlighted by their failure to get the support of the younger generation of their style of politics. Their failure to work among the masses has meant that their ideas did not take root among the masses. So even the propaganda by the moderates did not reach the masses. So moderates have realized that they are no longer relevant in this sphere. After effects on the extremists. So extremists, we have seen, yes, their ideas have taken root among the people, but we have seen lack of leadership, different perception of their goals with respect to Swaraj, for example. For Tilak, Swaraj, some sort of a self-government. For Aurobindo, it means complete independence. So they were not clear with respect to what this Swaraj will mean. At a politico-ideological level, their emphasis on the mass participation, on their need to broaden the social base, was a progressive improvement over the moderates. So they raised the patriotism from the level of an academic pastime to one of the service and the sacrifice of the country. So this is again a very key line which you need to remember. But politically, progressive extremists proved to be a social reactionary. Tilak has revivalist and obscurantist undertone. We have seen whether it was the use of the Shivaji festival, Ganpati festival, or the age of consent bill. We have discussed that in detail last time. Bipin Chandrapal and Aurobindo spoke of the Hindu nation, Hindu interest. So Hindu tinge was there, which alienated a lot of Muslims. Those seemingly revivalist and obscure tactics of the extremists were directed against the foreign rule. They had an effect, an unhealthy relationship between the politics and the religion. So this is not right. So politics and religion, the mixture of these three things, and we know the effect we can see in the present times also. So the tendency which started with the Swadeshi movement, though unintended, it was not intended to mix these two things, but it will have a wider ramifications later on. Tick, because of the partitions on the lines of the religion. Okay. So this is in all about the Swadeshi movement. Very quickly, the difference between the moderates and the extremists. What I'll say first is the social base. Moderate social base was zamindar and the urban. Extremist social base of rural and the lower class. Ideology, Western thought, Indian history and culture. Perception of the British in essence are just and hence we need to persuade them for reforms. They rejected the British rule as are just. They rejected that this is notion is wrong. British are unworthy of claiming the Indian loyalty. Their demand is constitutional reforms. Their demand is Swaraj. Method are 3P: prayers, petition, passing resolutions. There is non extra constitutional boycott, passive resistance. So this is in essence the difference between moderates and the extremists. So we are done with the moderate and extremist, and in the next session we'll talk about the Surat split. It will be a relatively smaller session. There also I'll discuss a few questions, है ना, कई questions discuss करेंगे, because for the past 2 to 3 discussions sessions we did not have any questions per se. So we'll discuss a few questions and then we'll discuss the Surat split. And after that session we'll talk about the revolutionaries, and then again we'll talk about the Ghadarites. Okay? And after that we'll talk about the Home Rule League movement, and that with this we'll finish this theme 5, and we will enter into the Gandhian phase, which is a very, very important phase, that is theme 6. With this we finish our session for today. See you all in the next session. Bye bye. Thank you.